groups, but I deal with a lot of stuff that goes into the production world. And one of the big deals is change orders. And the more I talk with people, the more it's a challenge, and either they're losing a lot of money because of the change orders or they're making some money. So this is information I've learned over the years, and hopefully it'll help you as you go forward. Now, I think it's pretty obvious that we can lose money in a lot of different ways. And certainly one of them is right there in the fact that we have to do change orders. So these are the 7 things I'm going to talk about. This is probably the longest presentation that I have for this education day. So we're going to move along very, very quickly. Obviously, you can get a hold of these slides, or feel free to get in touch with me as we wrap up, and I'll be happy to chat with you about anything you want to chat with. So one of the biggest issues for companies is they just don't get them written up. And there's a lot of different reasons for this, especially if you have in-house staff that are working the job site. They quite often are either distracted or think like, if we're doing a job this big, we should have included this kind of thing in there. And then as I've mentioned a couple of different times, and part of the presentations yesterday, was that even the little things, if they're not included in change orders, make a big difference in terms of profit. And so sometimes we just go like, this isn't a big deal, or this isn't a big activity. And just even the small little things are going to deteriorate the net profit very, very quickly if they're not captured in a change order. So what constitutes a change? And so from my side of the fence, anything that's not written in the contract or agreed on in the plans is a change. Now, I'm going to be very, very clear here. I don't really care if it involves money or not. If it's just a change of scope, in other words, we changed from brass hardware to brushed nickel, that's a change order from the original contract. And where this really comes into an important, possibility is if it does go to an arbitrator or to a court of law. If it's not written up, it is not going to go in the way of the contractor. But more importantly to this presentation, it's about those little things that do cost money. Now, the one exception is sometimes sales promised that something would be in there and it didn't make it into the paperwork. And then I would encourage you to write up a change order for the client anyway, just to document it. But also you might think about doing what we're starting to call internal changes. So basically, internally, we write up a change and we decide that change cost us $500. So when we get to the end of the job and we do a little debrief, we find out, yeah, we went over budget because of things that weren't included. So the solution for this one, write up every change. Secondly, one of the other issues that occurs with change orders is they just take too long to process. And so if something is needing to be done right away on site, I understand that. Sometimes we get verbals, yeah, that'll be okay. If it doesn't get written up for a period of time, if it goes a week or two past where the change actually takes place, it might not be a big deal. 3 to 4 weeks, it starts becoming really, shaky as to whether we're ever going to get paid for that. And if you wait till the end of the job, you're in deep trouble. So many clients, they remember, they're fine, but, if they don't have that change order right away, then it becomes a problem. Now, one of the things that I like to think about is dealing with client expectations. And the thing that I have seen is that over the course of a job, if something gets done and there's no documentation for it, clients start assuming or expecting that it's all part of the deal, or that they're never going to see a bill for that. And so, like I said, the longer it drags out, the more that expectation increases in the client's mind. And then when you get to the end of the job, you might get paid, but you end up with a, conflict, if you will, with the client. And let me tell you something, anytime you have a conflict with a client, you lose. It doesn't matter whether you get paid or not, you're going to lose, whether it's reputation, referrals, or just ill will. And so you want to make sure that these change orders are processed very, very quickly. So here's some of the solutions to that. Now, one of the ways that companies are making sure things get done more quickly is have that field staff actually be writing up some of these change orders. And I'm going to tell you, some of these electronic platforms like Buildertrend, CoConstruct, there's another one on the market for bigger companies called Procore. They allow you to very, very quickly write up change orders and share them with clients. And the faster you get them done, the more likely you'll get paid. And in fact, these programs will actually dump them straight into a bill so that it becomes part of the process. Now, in order to make this happen, you have to educate, you have to train, provide tools and quotes. I'm going to share some of those with you in a few minutes. It's a big deal to manage them and discipline them, because just because you let them write up a change order doesn't mean the staff will do it automatically. And obviously, like anything else, I think you should track results. How are we doing on them? Do we make the money we should be making? Is there something else we need to do? Set policy for turnaround time. I think that's pretty much a no-brainer. But I think any company, if a change order is discussed with a client, it ought to be turned around within at least 48 hours, and probably better within 24 hours. What this does for you, especially if you're funneling information through your sales team, it tells the salespeople, drop everything you're doing right now and deal with the change order. In other words, a client that is in progress takes precedence over one who's coming through the process. So we have to discipline that turnaround time. And that last little bullet point there, it may be that you've got this task assigned to somebody who's already super busy. So if you do a good job with the field information, the office manager can probably turn around change orders. It doesn't have to be the estimator or the president of the company or something like that. So you may want to look into, if you're having trouble getting these things turned around, you may want to look into, maybe it's time for somebody else to be doing that. Now, third issue that quite often comes up is just accurate pricing. And so this is a quick illustration. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but this is just a quick little vignette of what might be happening. So you're working on a client's house. They want to change the window. It's going to require a new window. It's going to require some new framing and so forth like that. And when you stop and really think about what needs to go into this change order. Now, you'll notice right here at the bottom, there are no exterior or interior finishes done, and the rough-ins or rough-ins being installed. So nothing's been done, just the framing. So the question becomes, what do you need in this change order? Well, there's some obvious things like demo, obviously. Then there's some reframing. The new window costs more than the old window did. Now, you remember I made the point of saying in this job, the rough-ins haven't been done. So why are the trade contractors in this potential change order? Well, just making a window bigger may change the layout of a light fixture. So now we need an additional light fixture, or change the layout of the electrical in general. What about the plumber? Now, not so much for this one, although if it involves a vent of some kind, it may change the layout. What about dump fees? We very seldom think about those. And what about the fact that we have to stop and talk to the client? So there's some supervision. Now, this is that Excel spreadsheet that I put together. Now, if you want a copy of this calculator, just send me an email at tim@remodelersadvantage.com. more than happy to share it with you because you were nice enough to sit through my blabbering about all this. But what this does is it forces you to think through, if you use it right, it forces you to think through what has to go into this project. So you see right up here at the top, we're doing a little calculation. We put the markup that we want on the change order in there. We put our hourly rate and we put productive hours per day. This would assume that a lead carpenter spends some time planning. Now this will show up in terms of calculation. You'll notice I've got administration in there. Got a couple of hours of extra time for administration. I've come down here. HVAC is going to be impacted by the placement of that high efficiency PVC pipe because we moved the window. Here's one of the things that we don't often put in. What about cleanup and trash disposal? And what about this one down here? In order to keep this job on track, I've got to send somebody to the lumber yard. That's a 2-hour process for me at $100 or $50 an hour. Now, the obvious things like demo, framing, the window, we're not going to forget those things. This helps us see what else might have to go into this change order. And it also can be done on a tablet in the field. So a lead carpenter or a project manager can go ahead and fill in a lot of these things. And then right over here, it will calculate a number of different things. Here's the costs, adding up all these down here. Here's the marked up price for the client by saying we've got 10 extra hours in this job. That's 1 extra day. Now you can obviously change the cells to give you decimal numbers. And so we're going to add 1 day to this change order. So if this was all there was to it, we could say the change order cost of the client is $2,087 and it add 1 day to the contract in extension. So very, very simple, basic calculator. I'll show you how this gets improved with a couple other things. Now, just a couple, before we get into some other details about how to do this, change order basics, okay? I need to open up the chat room here. Okay, good. So Debbie from Enterprises, send me an email directly and I can just attach it directly to that. So change orders are difficult to estimate. They can be money makers. They can be money losers. Now, here's the thing I want you to pay attention to most. These two right here. They always take more time than you think they will. And so, for example, you should never write a change order with 6 hours of labor in it. There's just no way that it's going to be 6 hours and then they're going to be productive for the other 2 hours. So make it 8 hours, right? 4 hours maybe, but 6 hours, no, it's going to be 8. And then right here, they always cost something, all right? So make sure that you're aware of that. Now, here's the illustration. So you talk to the client one Monday morning for 30 minutes about a change order. You got to call some trade contractors to put them off, right? Because everything happens last minute. You take about 2 hours to make sure we've got everything figured out. It takes an hour to process it. Now, granted, that may not be on site. That would be in the office. Now, please understand that even in the office, when we're working on a change order, that's extra money. Otherwise, what would we be doing? We'd be working on jobs that are coming into production, right? Excuse me. So we're processing it. We file it. It's about 5 hours of work to get that change order done. How much has that already cost? Well, at $45 an hour, that's already $225. And then we add the sticks and bricks. And so as you're working through these change orders, please understand that no matter, before you ever do any work, they're going to cost you money. Now, whether you choose to charge the client for it, that's another little thing. All right. Rules for estimating: try to think of everything, admit you missed something, realize that it seems like a lot of money. This right here is the big deal for change orders. I don't know how many you've done, but you're going to drop back on those babies and you go like, there's no way this could cost that much money. I used the illustration in another seminar about a solid wood door. A client comes along and says, hey, these doors are amazing. Could you add one more over here? It's always been a problem to get from that room to this room. Could you add a door over here? And you come back. Now, every door in the contract costs the client $1,000, right? You come back to them with a change order for $1,100 because it's a little more complicated after the fact. And they go, there's no way this door could cost $1,100. You're thinking it might be too much money. And you just need to understand it costs more when you're doing a change order. So realize that even no cost change orders are going to cost you something. Illustration here, clients catch you before you frame any walls. They say, we'd like to make this powder room bigger. And this has to do with down the road costs as well. We want to make this powder room a little bigger. Could we move this wall 6 inches? No problem. You haven't framed anything yet, but you haven't thought about the fact that will that 6 inches change the plumbing, change the electrical, and possibly change the square footage and cost of floor covering. In the bathroom, the powder room, it's imported Italian tile. Out in the hall, hardwood, very different cost. And so you always want to be sure that you look at all those kinds of things. Now, another place that contractors find themselves in a big jam is with the time and materials contracts. Now, it doesn't matter to me whether you're changing your change orders are time and materials or the whole contract is time and materials, because we make assumptions with changes when either one of those things is true. So the job is time and material, so the client understands that any extra work will cost extra. Wrong. The client doesn't understand it, and unless it's in writing, they don't quite pay attention to it. Second one, the contract states that all changes will be time and materials, therefore the client understands that any changes will cost extra. Again, wrong. They don't pay attention to these things. And so it's incumbent on the contractor to make sure they are signing and understanding that any changes that occur are going to cost money, and we want to get them in writing. So here's some faulty reasoning that fits into this category. Clients are not trying to get something for nothing. Some clients very definitely are, and they're going to play you for it. Clients actually remember what they read in the contract. We know that's not true, but we tend to believe it with time and materials. Clients actually add up how much they are spending. Not true. You start with $100,000, and if that final bill comes back 10 grand over, they go like, how could it be so much more? They don't pay attention to those things unless it's in writing. Clients have unlimited funds. Now, it feels that way at times, but they don't. There is a limit to how much they want to spend on their job. So clients know that changes add time to the contract. How many times have people even signed change orders and then they still want you to be done before the birthday party? You know what? It doesn't work. It can't be done. Maybe it can, but it isn't done typically. And so clients don't understand that. Clients understand disruption time, which I'll get to in a minute. And then all clients are ethical. So truth is, you can lose money working time and materials, both on contracts and on change orders. So what do? Write up every single change order. You know, basically in the basics of the job, it says we're going to do these 50 things. The client wants to do something different or has to do something different. We write it up. So make sure that in your contract, it states how they will be billed for any additional work. What will it be? The cost will be X amount per hour. The markup will be this amount. And then any materials will be marked up this amount. So then state on the change order form exactly that same language, and then do your math so that it says labor at 5 hours times whatever it was you were supposed to do, and then marked up whatever that markup is. So on a time and materials budget, you want to say this will add this amount to those ceiling costs. In other words, if the general contract was estimated at $100,000, this change order will increase that estimated completion cost to $105,000. Okay. And it will add this many days to the contract. And I'll say it now and I'll bring it up later on. You want it to say very emphatically, this will move the proposed closing date to this day, not just this many days, because remember, clients don't add it up, right? So you have to add it up for them. They have to see it in writing. And then obviously, like almost everything else we do in business, we want to make sure we get a signature for that change order. So let me just emphasize again, if you do time and materials contracts or time and materials change orders, get them in writing. Okay, now there are those situations where you do a fixed price contract and most of your change orders are fixed price, but sometimes you don't know. And so it's a good idea to do a time and materials change order. The same things apply for that. You still, your original contract should say that you do this on occasion, and then it should say, this is how we charge you for that. And then I would say also that when you do write up that time and materials contract, you should estimate the amount of time. So if you run into some unforeseen conditions where you're looking at it and I don't know this is going to only be 6 hours or 8 hours or 12 hours, I think you ought to go like, all right, my worst case scenario would be this amount. And so you might say estimated cost to complete this change order will be somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000, and get that signature. And that way the client knows that they're looking at a potential $7,000, and make sure that's plenty high to cover you. Otherwise, when you come back, it may be a challenge. So get it in writing, get as much detail as you can in there for them. Now, one of the other places that I've recently been experiencing with clients is this idea of allowances with markup losses. And so very typically, and especially with kitchens, bathrooms, things like that, there are a number of selections that are on allowance. And so the allowance is a placeholder. It goes in there to say, we're going to put 20 grand in here for cabinets, and that's how much the client has to spend. Now, the problems that arrived with these kinds of allowances, number one, clients always assume that the contractor is clairvoyant and knows exactly what they're going to pick. And so they say, like, let's go drop back a little bit. Let's say we have 10 grand in there for the budget we have for the cabinets. And we have explained over and over and over again that it all depends on what you pick, blah, 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 blah. The client is always going to assume that whatever they pick, whatever their desires are, can be covered by the $10,000. And it's a shame that it's that way, but that's the way it is. And so we have to be really careful. The second problem is that quite often allowances get just a quick definition, like tile I like to use. They say tile allowance for this job is $6,000. No indication of what that will buy. The clients have no clue what they can get from it. And so when they go picking tile, they have no idea about how to stay in that $6,000 allowance. And then the thing that's more important for us with this is proper markup is in the body of the contract, and quite often it does not extend to allowance justification. So quite often, many companies, not just a few, but many will mark up the body of the contract, that initial allowance, say 50% or 60%. But when it comes time to justify the allowance, it's only marked up 1.2 or 20%. And that seems to be the common number that a lot of companies use. I think possibly because of that 10 and 10 thing, 10% for overhead and 10% for net profit. And so, and obviously they're not even getting that with a 20% markup. So here's the way it plays out in real life. And I'm going to show you a spreadsheet here. Hopefully you can see it as we work through it. So typically the markup changes when it comes out for that allowance. Now here's the spreadsheet that I put together to help illustrate this challenge. So right up here, obviously the same items we had on the original spreadsheet for this is the body of the contract. But then I've added some concept here. These are how allowances are going to be marked up. And you'll notice the difference I have here is 1.5 on the original and 1.2 on the allowance justification. Right here, we have the original budget. So this is for cabinets because it was something that used to, hurt me greatly. So in the original budget, we have 8 hours of work for the cabinets, labor cost at $400, and here's the original allowance. Now, the clients have gone out and picked out cabinets that extend the cost to $15,000. Now, I'm going to add some labor, which amounts to $200, and that gives me this result over here. So the original cost of the allowance was the 10 grand plus the 400. Okay. Now, the sale price of the allowance was 15,600 based on the 1.5 markup, or the GP on the allowance was 33%. And then if you look down here, this will calculate the new price on the allowance based here, which includes the 1.2, and then the new cost, which show us a 29% GP with the allowance justification only marked up 1.2, okay? And so what it effectively tells us right here is that we effectively lost $1,560 on this allowance, okay? Now, one time, I mean, still $1,500 is a lot of money, right? So the one-time shot may not be a big deal, but if it happens over and over and over again on a single job, it's going to cost you plenty in terms of your net profit. Because where does this money come from, folks? There's no magic fund, right? It comes directly out of the net profit. So here's what you do. Use allowances that reflect what the client really wants. Ask a lot of questions. Say, what is it you want? Do you want granite? Do you want silestone? Do you want, quartz? What do you want? And if in your market, there are grades of that, like I know there is in granite, some granite is priced here, some granite's priced, mid-price, and some is more expensive. If that's a thing, make sure you get a good idea of which level they want that granite to be in. So use that pricing for your allowance. And again, things like granite and cabinets, I think you should send it off to your supplier and say, here's what they may be looking at. Give me an allowance that fits into their budget. And then put that allowance in there. Do not lowball allowances. And I've had some experience with this where we lowball just to get the job. And what happens? We're fighting for the rest of the job. So don't do that with this situation. Detail out the allowance spec to represent what is in and what is not. So I mentioned that tile allowance, $6,000. What will it get you? It will get you 6-inch by 36-inch floor tile at 400 square feet with some baseboard, or if it's in a bathroom, what kind of tile will allow them to put on the walls? how many linear feet of accent strip at $30 a foot, you know, all that detail that matches up with their job. So when they go to think about selecting tile, they're able to go like, all right, we've got 30 feet at $30 a linear foot, so I can't go over that if I'm going to stay in my allowance. This will help avoid that sticker shock when they bring you back all their selections, you price it up and you go, oh, you're $5,000 over. They go, there's no way. You didn't put enough in there. And then you're in a fight. If possible, use actual products specified in the allowance. And so this is what I used to do with bathrooms. I don't do bathrooms anymore. I clean them every now and then, but I don't build them anymore. But what I did with my clients was I said, here's your allowance. You get this Kohler toilet. You get this Kohler tub. I use Kohler a lot. Easy in my hometown. I know there are others. You get this vanity and this sink. Okay. If you stick with these products, you can do this for this amount. And then I usually did that before I signed the contract, the final contract, but even if you do it after, but that way, when they go out to pick, they can say, that tub Tim told us about was $600. This one's $700. We have just elevated our allowance by $100. Okay. And then when you get right down to it, if they like what you picked, which hopefully they will, then boom, you're done. You don't even have to worry about justifying the allowance. And then detail out for them how you're going to adjust the pricing when it comes time to justify those allowances. All right, the sixth one, we're getting down. We got 6 and 7 to go here. The sixth one is what I just call client communication errors. And there's 4 basic ways that this comes across. Client-driven requests, hidden or unforeseen conditions, just need to get this done to keep the job going. You should have known, or we should have known. I know we've experienced all of those. So part of this issue is setting proper expectations. So in your contract language, you need, how are we going to deal with each of these? Now, obviously the shoulda, woulda, couldas don't get in there, but how do you deal with unforeseen conditions? How do you deal with driven, client-driven change orders? And that's basically what needs to go in there. But your field staff needs to know what's in that contract language. At the pre-construction meeting, and if you don't know what that is, get in touch with me, I'll explain it to you. But hopefully you're fully aware of that. But the pre-construction meeting, you want the project manager or the lead carpenter, the person that's going to be interfacing with the client, to talk about changes. Bring it up. Here's how we deal with changes. Now, you've talked about it in sales, but bring it up from the production team because it makes it easier to deal with once we're on site. And then we have the job site conversation. So, client-driven request. We would like to know how much it will cost to, or I would like to, whoever is the interactor should never say anything like, sure, we can do that, or we can do anything, or yeah, that's easy, or no problem, because what the client starts saying to themselves is not very much money and not much of a disturbance to the schedule. And both of those are wrong. So you want to train people to say, I'm sure it can be done, but it will add extra cost to the project and extra time. Would you like me to see how much? And then obviously, what do they want to do? If you have really sharp people out there in the field, maybe you can train them to say, do you have a budget in mind? Which allows you, if they go, we want, an extra door added over here. It's solid mahogany, 2 inches thick with brass hardware, and we want that to cost less than $1,000. You don't want to laugh in their face, but at least you could politely say, well, in our experience, that's at least $2,000. Would you like me to see exactly how much it is? And they can say, no, don't bother, or they can say, yes, they will. And then advise them how long it will take to get back to them. Unforeseen conditions. Somebody finds rot or termite damage. We contact the client. The great thing about it now is we have lots of opportunity to do that. Do not proceed without permission. Okay. Now I have it in here as written permission. Again, I'm going to say right here, sometimes verbal is okay as long as it's followed up with a written one within 24 hours. So don't assume that they're going to take care. I've uncovered some termite damage in the front wall. Would you like me to see what the additional cost and the time impact will be? Well, you may be sitting there going like, what are they going to do? It's pretty much a given. They have to pay us to do this. But what I'm saying is let them say, yes, you have permission to spend my money. Okay. It just creates a much better flavor for everybody. Or would you like me to go ahead and write up the change order and send it over? Yes, I would. Please take care of that. Now, what about those, you know what, this just needs to get done. You know, there's a pipe in the wall, the plumber is there. Maybe we could have seen it before it happened. So for the field staff that may be listening in here, don't give in to your feelings. You know, sometimes once we've demoed a wall, we can see clearly what's there. It couldn't have been seen. Maybe it could have been seen, right? It just, you know, didn't get dealt with during the initial selling. So again, go back to that previous example, talk to the client, get them to say, yeah, go ahead. And fourthly here, the client indicates that a change order is something the salesperson agreed to, but it was not written down in the contract. So have the conversation with the client, be confident. Don't decide before they speak. Sometimes, you know, our tones, our body language gives it away and they start, you know, taking advantage of that. Talk with sales about whether this is really true or not, then get back to the client with whatever has to be done. In many cases, the way you handle this, if you're in the field, is you write up the change order, you hand it off to the salesperson, and then you let the salesperson take care of that problem. I remember a job where we were building a new house. The stairs from the second floor to the third floor, which was the attic, but it was a finished attic, ended right at where rafters actually came down and hit the plate. I, as the production guy, went, man, we're going to lose a lot of money fixing this problem. I handed it off to our salesperson. They sold the client a dormer to go where it needed to go. It worked out really well, more light in the attic, all those kinds of things. And we didn't have to eat as much of it as we would have if I hadn't turned it over to sales. So at times, we make sure that sales gets back in there and deals with it. And the last thing that I want to talk about is what I call disturbance days. Now, what these are basically is a delay. I'm going to put this up. A delay in the project that costs the company overhead and net, but it's not accounted for by additional labor. And I'm just going to summarize the rest of this slide. Basically, what that means is when you figure out a change order, there's 2 actual days of labor in that change order, but you actually lose 4 days in the schedule, which means 2 of those days are just overhead and net that you're losing. In other words, we lose, it pushes the job out by 4 days, but we only get paid for 2 of them. And this can happen whether it's in-house labor or with trade contractors. So the important consideration is if people can stay busy, but they're not as productive as they should have been, 1 day may actually be only a half a day of labor. In other words, if we say, okay, I can find something to do, that's code word for inefficient. And so maybe it's just a half a day instead of 1 whole day. And then how does the disturbance day actually impact overhead and net if we only work with trade contractors? And so it has to be a real thing that it pushes the schedule out. In other words, if you can shuffle trade contractors around and still finish on the intended day, then it isn't really disturbance days. So this is one of the reasons why scheduling is such a huge deal. You have to know, is it going to work? Now, here's the calculator for you, and you notice everything's the same over here. But over on this side, I have set up like overhead and net per day for us as a company is going to be $350 a day. If I decide there's 4 days of disturbance plus the 1 day of actual labor, then we're going to add $1,400 to that cost, and the client is now charged $34.87. Now, for those of you who are laughing and say, I could never sell that, I almost agree with you, right? But the point is, if you know it's going to be $1,400, at least you know you're up against a challenge. You may only put 1 day in that change order, but at least you got some of it, okay? But you now know that instead of 1,400 days, you're now $1,000 down in terms of net and overhead, which you want to make up, or it might make you be a little more serious about finishing on time. All right, let me just work through a few more slides here and give you a few more insights on change orders, and then we'll open up for any questions. Perhaps just turn it back to Natalie for her to wrap things up for us in this segment. So, things that must be in every change order. Obviously, the description of the work, the sale price of the new work, the final cost of the project, including the sale price of the new work, the added time frame to the schedule, and right, so, and the obvious revised completion date. Now, you'll notice here, if there's a special aspect of this job, if it has to be done by Christmas, Halloween, Thanksgiving, a birthday, a wedding date, a baby's being born, doesn't matter what it is, I think you ought to put, please note in big font and red letters, or whatever it is, please note this change order will push the completion date past the birthday, the wedding, whatever it is, and make sure the client initials it and you know that you have it in writing. What are the payment options? Most people nowadays are doing payment upon signature, which is really the best way to make that happen. Signature lines, and then obviously date lines. Change order process. Obviously, we're going to talk about it with the client in the field. Typically, we're going to fill out that completion change order type of form, maybe one of those calculator forms. We're going to estimate this change order. We're going to present the final cost to the client. We're going to get a signature. Then we're going to execute the client. No. That's supposed to be a joke, right? Can't hear you laughing, but that's okay. No, then we're going to execute the change order, okay? So we don't do it until we get the signature. I've already indicated that in some cases, we want to move it through, we want to get the work started, but that signature has to be gotten within 24 hours. The great thing about the world that we live in now, different than when I was a production manager, all I had was a fax machine. We have email, we have cloud-based systems, we have all those kinds of things. So even if somebody's on business in Hong Kong, we're able to get a signature from them within 24 hours. What about presenting this to our client? So I'm just going to put them all up there so that, I'm sorry, I went too fast. We're going to go back. Presenting the change order. Schedule a time to meet and discuss. Don't do it, can we talk about this while they're getting ready to go to work? Be confident of your numbers. You should never, ever walk into a meeting with a client wondering whether you got the right number. You should always say, you know what? It seems high to me, but you know what? It's the right number, okay? Be ready for all kinds of different responses. Never take on the client's pain, right? So this goes right along with this one, but here's what it is. A client says, oh man, I guess we're going to have to take some money out of our retirement account. good deal. Start taking it out. I'm ready, right? Don't ever, ever think that there's a challenge like this that the client can't bear. Never reduce the price in the client's presence. So if the client says, well, what about if we take out the doors? What if we take out this? What about if we take out that? Say that those are all good options. Let me refigure the price. You go away, you come back, and you say, here's the price. Never feel sorry for the client. Deal with any objections you find with what they need to know, and then always stay confident of your numbers. All right? So always remember, clients don't want to pay for anything they don't have to, and some of them will use their way to get that. Shoulda is not the issue. The question is, did we see it? If you had seen it in the original contract, the client would be paying for it anyway. So just remember that. It's not an issue of should we have seen it, but the issue is, did we see it? People have access to money when they need it. It's a very slippery slope. I do not like contingencies to pay for extras. I like charging them for everything that's added to the job. I think it just gets confusing when we have contingencies. If you choose to put them in there, you better write change orders against the contingencies so they know how much they've spent and when are they going to start getting charged for additional work. Clients often forget conversations during the sales price. It's not a field decision to give away changes, so allow someone else to make that decision. Okay, so we're at the end here. I just want to reinforce to you, we have some great podcasts that are already been broadcast about change orders. You might go back and listen to those. Feel free to email me. And like I said, if you want any of those spreadsheets that I put up for you, just email me. That way it's very easy for me to turn it around, attach those to that. And then obviously, if you'd like to sign up for my newsletter, it's a very straightforward process. Comes out every month. I handle production related issues. I talk a little bit about what I'm doing in my personal life, like fishing or sitting in front of the fire. And also I talk about where I'm going to be for the next few months. So if there's any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat room there. I'm going to go ahead and stop the share here so we can go back and actually see each other. And I will turn it back over to Natalie if she's got something we need to cover before we break.
I do not. Let's see.
Okay.
What was I at?
All right.
I'm sorry,
any questions out there? Anybody? Any I can answer. So right here, I think we're going to be taking a break, but again, I'll leave it up to Natalie to introduce that for us.
Yeah, so it's definitely break time. We're going to come back at 1:10 for the trade show time, and I believe Angela's going to pull us out of here and then put us back into rooms. I'm not sure, but yeah, you don't have to do anything. Just hang tight if you have any questions. You guys are welcome to ask now.
Yeah, anything
Natalie,
that pops up, put it in the chat room.
Yeah.
I'll be sitting here.
I think there's a video probably for one of the people that you should be
That was
showing
always
at the
my
end.
impression, that usually one of the
Yeah.
sponsors has a video
Yeah.
after the session too.
Oh,
Tim, did you put your info in the chat area, your email address? Can you
Sure.
do that? I'll send you an email. Great presentation.
let's see. So it looks like my next video is after the next presentation. I showed a video before the presentation. But yeah, it looks like we're just on our
There's
break
usually
time.
one before and then the sponsor afterwards to the 3-minute videos. Only because I'm one of those 3-minute videos, not on this group. So I would want it shown. They're doing it in all sessions right now at the end.
Oh, okay. That's weird. I don't have one in my presentation. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's in the next one, I think.
Yeah, these are all, this is a PowerPoint I was
There
given,
wasn't one
so
for this.
I appreciate your,
I was trying to help
Okay.
if I could.
yeah.
All right, so I put my email there in the chat box for everybody if you want that.
Is there a video that I'm supposed to be playing?
At the end, no, that one does.
Oh.
That one does not have a video closing. Sorry.
Okay, cool. All right, no worries,
All right,
guys. So we're
sorry.
on break then.
Psych. Gotcha.
It's okay.
Do you have that calendar? It'll show you.
Yeah, because there's only 10 of us in here, I'm more than happy to take verbal questions if anybody wants to